In fact, what they try and do is tell you it's all chemical reactions, electron fluxes of material substance, following the laws of physics, chemistry, biology.
This is Dr. Eben Alexander, a neuroscientist who came out of Duke University and had been practicing medicine since the 80s. He became famous in 2008 for his story where he describes a peculiar experience.
Let's talk about how you got sick. You woke up in the middle of the night feeling ill and in pain.
It was like being struck by a freight train. 4:30 in the morning, woke up, never had anything like that before. My last words to my wife, don't call 911. Trust me, I'm a doctor, it's just a muscle spasm, and I was gone.
Fast forward just a few hours later, and Dr. Alexander would end up in a coma, fighting for his life as he'd hoped to overcome an extremely rare but deadly form of meningitis, a bacterial infection that affects the brain and spinal cord.
So your wife was being told that you might die?
And that she would be raising our 2 boys without me.
But as he laid there in the hospital bed that fateful morning, Dr. Alexander claims something fascinating happened to him. In that instant, where he felt consciousness slip away from him, he immediately found himself on a journey. The place he was traveling was like nothing he'd ever seen or experienced. There were no shapes, no sense of space, language, or even time.
Did you believe in heaven?
When I was younger, I thought a heaven and a loving God made sense, but through my academic neurosurgery career, I saw less and less that could be the case.
So what could Dr. Alexander have possibly been experiencing? In several different accounts, he goes on to explain how in that moment he realized he was no longer tethered to reality. He was then rescued by a bright white light that whisked him to yet another location.
And was a rip in the fabric of reality that just opened up around me.
This new world to him was something he described as super vivid. There were colorful skies, beautiful flowers blooming in every direction, butterflies, you name it. He thought that he'd found paradise until he noticed a beautiful woman with him. This woman had a wide, radiant smile, clear blue eyes. To him, she was breathtaking. She didn't speak, and yet he could hear her clearly. Her words were, "You are loved, you are cherished, you can do no wrong." She went on to explain how she would teach him many things, but afterwards he'd have to go back. Then she went on to show him more of this new world. 7 long days passed while Dr. Alexander laid lifeless in his coma. The doctors were completely unaware of what he was experiencing. After so much time, they, in fact, had given up any hope of reviving him. Laying brain dead for 7 days wasn't something people typically come back from. His wife even began fearing what the future might look like without her husband. Then, randomly after a full week of being unresponsive, his eyes opened. As he slowly came back to life, the nurses and doctors noticed him chanting the words in a low tone. "Everything is okay. You are cherished." The same words he heard in his first encounter with the woman from that weird place he'd just come from. It only took a few weeks for Dr. Alexander to make a miraculous full recovery. When the news and media got a hold of his story, they asked what was different about him since the experience. This was his response.
How are you different after going through this experience?
Well, my family says I'm nicer.
That's a good thing.
Really has changed me in every way by realizing that our souls are eternal.
Over the last 50 years, more than 8 million Americans across the U.S. reported a near-death experience, a moment where you're considered either clinically deceased or the body is in such a vegetative state that you can't really do much more than breathe, so the heart can continue pumping blood. It's extremely rare that people ever experience these conditions, and even more rare for people to recover from them. Many of those that have, however, shared interesting memories of seeing bright lights, feelings of overwhelming peace, and in some cases, even accounts of leaving their own bodies. Whether you believe Dr. Alexander's story or not, scientists, for decades, have studied experiences like his and conducted all sorts of research, all in an attempt to get the definitive answer to one question: what happens when we die? Throughout history, science has come up with some pretty interesting answers to this question. Recently, however, an extraordinary idea has emerged that not only takes a unique approach to this question, it started us down a path that might actually lead us to a real answer. So buckle up as we look to uncover the secrets of what happens when we cross into the great beyond. My fellow scholars, today's message was inspired by passages from a publication that can be found on Amazon Audible entitled Biocentrism by Robert Lanza, a captivating title that explores the question of whether or not life truly lasts forever. Audible offers unlimited access to thousands of audiobooks, podcasts, and originals, all included with Audible Plus. And with Audible Premium Plus, you'll enjoy even more perks, including 2 free audiobooks every month. If you sign up for a free trial using the link in the description, you not only gain lifetime access to 2 free publications, you also support the channel in ways that allow us to bring you even more content just like this. So, what are you waiting for? To start your journey of discovery with Audible, click the link in the description and sign up today. In order for us to truly grasp what happens once we pass on, we should start with what we already know happens to our physical bodies. According to the National Institute of Health, death takes place when an individual has sustained either an irreversible stoppage of circulatory and respiratory functions or irreversible ceasing of all functions of the entire brain, including the brainstem. To put it plainly, our bodies simply stop working. Everything from heartbeat to brain function, it all eventually fades, but not before a series of disturbing processes take place. Without context, it can kind of seem like 1 minute, everything works, and then it just doesn't. The reality is a bit more complex than that, though. On the inside, as our life energy starts to run out and our bodies begin shutting down, cells decompose, enzymes go haywire, and the illnesses our immune systems once kept in check get to take over our bodies. It gets ugly. From the outside, we fortunately don't get to see all of this take place. Instead, we observe the muscles stiffen temporarily, while the skin becomes discolored. Our body temperatures drop down to room temperature, and our tissue slowly dissolves, until all that's left is a skeleton. And even that, of course, will also eventually crumble back into the earth. This sequence, often referred to as the post-mortem changes, has been the pillar by which we have understood death for ages. For some time now, however, people have wondered whether or not this process oversimplifies how death really works. It's raised questions like, what happens to the essence of who we are? Our consciousness, our memories and feelings? Do they just disappear? And is it even possible for science to teach us anything about the meaning of our existence? Throughout history, we haven't had much more than religious texts to suggest that there is more beyond life and the reality we know. Recently, however, a lot of shocking ideas have emerged that chip away at the notion that our journey ends once we take our last breath. For example, within the strange world of quantum physics, there's something called the observer effect. Across several different studies, scientists found that both light and matter can behave as either a wave or a particle, depending on whether they are being watched or observed. While this might seem a bit confusing, what this essentially means is that the behavior and shape of things throughout the universe aren't determined until we lay eyes on them. For example, let's imagine that I were to give you a mystery box as a gift. In this mystery box, there could either be money or a set of keys to a brand new car. One or the other, but not both. Until you open the box, science suggests that whatever is inside is in a kind of unknown state, as if the box contains both the money and the new car keys at the same time. Once the box is opened, however, the universe decides to make things one or the other. You'll either have a little extra cash to spend or those keys to your brand new ride. Nothing becomes certain until you actually take a look and see for yourself. For many, it might seem ridiculous to suggest that reality works this way, but one particular experiment became famous for having proven that this is definitely the case. In a famous study called the double-slit experiment, scientists determined that particles the very atoms and molecules that make up everything in our universe can exist in multiple states before choosing what to become. In this experiment, researchers created a setup where light was shown through two narrow slits onto a screen. Without anyone to observe how the light was behaving, the light formed an interference pattern suggesting the light took on the form of a wave, passing through both slits at the same time. However, when a detector was placed to observe how the light was passing through, the light instead began acting like particles, forming two distinct lines that passed through only one slit at a time. This later became a fundamental principle in quantum mechanics, helping us understand that particles can exist in multiple states, or a superposition until it's observed, at which point they collapse into a definite state. In essence, what this means is that the simple act of observation can influence reality at the quantum level. It hints that the universe might not have a fixed form until it's witnessed by a conscious observer. That observer is you. Even in a more practical sense, science has shown us that the relationship between consciousness and the universe is much more intimate than we might think. Consider, for example, the placebo effect. In 1955, an American anesthesiologist named Henry K. Beecher famously studied 15 clinical trials where patients dealt with a variety of issues, from skin conditions to neurological disorders. During this landmark study, Beecher observed nearly 35% of patients report major successes with the treatments they were given. Treatments that actually weren't meant to help with their conditions at all. After analyzing data from these patients, Beecher found significant improvements in their conditions, but the so-called medicines that were being used had zero therapeutic ingredients. The only causal factor that could have led to these drastic improvements was their belief, leading researchers to suggest that perhaps there is a much stronger connection between reality and our inner thoughts than we might have imagined. In the case of the patients being studied, they simply had to believe that the treatments and medicines they were using worked, and in a weird way, it would actually cause them to do just that. Earlier, we talked about Dr. Alexander's encounter with death, and how it could possibly shed light on what happens when we close our eyes for the last time. But even his story is just one of many who shared similar experiences. People who endured instances where they were clinically dead or in states of extremely low brain function, and yet they felt hyper-aware, seeing vivid lights, or even having detailed visions of events happening outside their physical body. Could these unusual experiences hint at our consciousness existing beyond the limits of a functioning body? These different puzzles within our reality hint to us that there must be a connection between consciousness and the universe that we've hardly begun to understand, which leads us to a theory that aims to tie everything together for us, a unique framework that just might offer unexpected answers about life, death, and the very nature of reality itself. Imagine for a moment that the universe is not some giant impersonal void, but rather a lush blend of collective consciousness that connects each and every one of us. Everything we think, feel, and observe reverberates throughout the universe, giving it shape and life rather than the other way around. This way of understanding how the universe works is what has come to be known as biocentrism. An idea that flips the script on the usual way we think about things. Instead of seeing life as something that emerged randomly in a pre-existing universe, it suggests that life and our consciousness are the keys to understanding the universe's true nature. It's a mind-bending concept, but one that's gaining traction among scientists and thinkers who are dissatisfied with the boundaries that limit more traditional explanations. The ideas that support biocentrism were first hinted at way back in the 1970s by John Wheeler, a celebrated astrophysicist and former disciple of Albert Einstein. His research encompassed everything from black holes in outer space to nuclear fission. When it came to his beliefs about reality and the universe, he was famous for being the man who pondered the nature of space and time, presenting the question, how can something come from nothing? His research went on to lay the foundation for biocentrism, where he established that the universe is participatory, meaning that all of the information that exists throughout the universe is created by the observer and is therefore theoretic in origin, since we all interpret reality in our own unique way. Today, Robert Lanza, an accomplished biologist who was part of the team that cloned the world's first human embryo, takes Wheeler's ideas even further. With a background in both natural science and theoretical physics, Lanza is credited with coining the term biocentrism and has published extensively on the topic. His work suggests that, at its core, biocentrism rests on a few key principles. The first being consciousness is primary, meaning it's not just a product of the brain, but a fundamental aspect of the universe. The next principle states that the universe is fine-tuned for life, which references how the laws of physics and the conditions of the cosmos appear perfectly tailored for life to emerge. The third principle is that space and time are subjective. In other words, they aren't external fixed parts of our reality, but rather tools our minds use to understand the world. The last principle states that death is an illusion, meaning that from a biocentric perspective, death isn't an ending, but a transition of consciousness from one state to another. Think of it like this: the universe. It isn't a movie playing on a screen, but rather a projector itself. Our consciousness isn't merely watching the film, it's the light emanating from the projector, creating the images and experiences we perceive as reality. In this analogy, the projector embodies the underlying structure of reality. The light beam is our consciousness and perception, and the screen represents the way we interpret the information we receive. Biocentrism proposes that just as a projector needs light to create images, the universe needs consciousness to exist. Without consciousness, there's no light, no images, no reality as we know it. This challenged the traditional view that consciousness is a product of the brain, like a movie playing in our heads. Biocentrism instead suggests that the brain is more like a receiver, tuning into the universal consciousness that exists in every living thing. Think about space and time. In our projector analogy, they're like the dimensions of the screen. They provide the framework for the images, but they don't exist independently of the projector's light. Biocentrism suggests that space and time aren't fixed external realities, but rather constructs of our consciousness. They're relative and subjective, just like the way we perceive a movie's length or the size of the screen. Now, let's consider death. In the traditional view, it's like the projector shutting off, the light beam extinguishing, and the screen going dark. But biocentrism offers a different perspective. It suggests that when we die, our individual consciousness, the light beam, doesn't vanish. Instead, it merges back into the universal consciousness, the projector itself. It's like the light beam returning to its source, the individual consciousness merging back into the infinite wellspring from which it came. This offers a comforting perspective on death, suggesting it's not an end, but a transformation, a continuation of consciousness in a different form. Biocentrism essentially challenges the age-old view that the way the universe operates and how we perceive it are completely separate. It instead suggests that we have the power to shape the very nature of our own existence, making us not just mere observers, but active participants in its ongoing evolution. Biocentrism is a radical idea, but it's one that invites us to think differently about the biggest questions of all. Who are we? Why are we here? And what happens when we die? Whether you fully embrace biocentrism or not, it's a theory that has the potential to transform our understanding of reality and our place within it. If biocentrism is even partially correct, it has profound implications for how we see ourselves and our place in the cosmos. It suggests we're not just insignificant specks in a vast, uncaring universe. Instead, we're deeply intertwined within the fabric of it. Our consciousness is more than a byproduct of evolution, but a force that shapes and is shaped by the universe around us. Quantum physics experiments, the mysteries of consciousness, and even the strange phenomena of near-death experiences all seem to point to one thing: a deeper connection. So, what do you think? Could biocentrism be the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe? I'd love to see your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy videos like this one, be sure to drop a like and hit that subscribe button. Also, feel free to check out some of our other videos. We'll see you in the next one.